Hi, I'm Daniel, and on this episode of the Filmcraziest Show, my guest was Jennifer Moeller, the costume designer for the Apple TV Plus original series Dickinson, which stars Hailee Steinfeld as poet Emily Dickinson in a look at her life in Amherst, Massachusetts in the 1850s. Jennifer Moeller is the main costume designer on the second season of the show, after being the assistant costume designer on the first season. She's one of the integral parts of bringing Emily Dickinson's world to life. I learned more about what goes into costume design in a show like this in a fun conversation, so let's get right into the interview. Okay, so Jennifer Moeller, costume designer for Dickinson. How's it going today?
Going great.
Awesome. I don't know how many of your interviews start this way, but I'm just really curious how you got into costume design.
Oh, okay. Well, I sort of came into it almost accidentally, actually. I was a painter and a sculptor. That was sort of my major. And I had a roommate, my freshman year roommate said, "Do you want to come take this class that sounds kind of cool about making clothes, making costumes?" And I thought, oh, sounds cool. Check it out. And I had been sewing my whole life. I had some very crafty grandmothers. So I started there, and I sort of really enjoyed it, and it was really fun. And they asked me one day if I would like to design a show for the drama department. And I said, sure, why not? And ultimately, I really sort of leaned into it and fell into it because I think that I found it pretty lonely being in the studio by myself. Um, and I think, I was also 19 years old. I didn't really have particularly very much to say when it came to my own work. And I found the collaboration between all the playwright and the directors and the other designers really fulfilling. And I loved having the plays be this sort of jumping off point for creative expression. And then I met this really wonderful designer from the Republic of Georgia who hired me to be his assistant when I got out of school, and we did operas together all over the world at the Met and at the Bolshoi and Paris. And so I started really in opera, and then eventually I went to the Yale Drama School where I met Elena Smith, and that was the sort of the beginning of my, and then together we worked on shows in graduate school and then beyond, and now I'm on Dickinson.
That's awesome. Now, for Dickinson, I noticed that you were like assistant costume designer on the first season, and then the main costume designer on the second season. So what were some of the what was that role change like for you?
Sorry, say it again.
Oh, what was yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, conveniently, John Dunn had left a really beautiful sort of base to work with right after season one. And I was sort of brought on to help with that. And then season two, I had the opportunity to sort of run with it from there. And I sort of took all the great work that we had done season one and then just built on it.
Okay. All right, nice. Now, are there any colors that you don't like that you only use on like rare occasions?
Colors. No, I don't. I think all colors are sort of um, are in play. I will say that we sort of lean into colors that are period appropriate, right? At least we did. At least we have been. We'll see where we go. Maybe we go into we break that a little bit as we go forward. But no, I don't think any colors are off. But thinking of color, I do really sort of craft each episode starting with Emily, and often in Emily in conjunction with the poem that's tied to the particular episode. And color really is an important part of that jumping off point. For example, in episode 4, I think in the one with the hedge maze, I think that's 4. The poem attached to that is the daisy follows soft the sun, right? So there's all this imagery of sun and daisies and warmth. And so we started with Emily in yellow. And that's one of the more obvious ones. And then we sort of like built everybody else in the world around that. So color, I mean, no colors are off the table, and color is a huge part of how I work.
Okay. Honestly, I was going to reference the yellow dress because I think that's been my favorite look so far. It looks so great.
Oh, great. Yeah, and then I also definitely it was linked to that poem. But then I thought when she's running around, then the hedge, like which yellow, what yellow, would really sort of pop with all that green. And we dyed. There was a fabric that was not yellow; it was a white and green floral pattern, and we wanted to make it yellow. So I went down many different dye samples trying to find just the right yellow for that.
Okay. Did you ruin any dresses trying to find that right yellow?
Well, we make all of Emily's clothes.
Okay.
So we start with the fabric, and I dye the fabric before we make the dress.
Okay.
To do it the other way.
Now, just like starting with Emily with her coloring, like I'm curious, just with how much time she spends with Sue, did they have to complement each other with their color schemes?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I start often, not always, but often start with Emily, and then I sort of like build around. And I'm always keen to make sure that the balances are good in each scene between the different characters. And then also particularly with Sue, I don't know how much you know about Emily's Dickinson's poetry, but there's several references to a snake, right? And in a very early draft of the final episode, I think there was supposed to be like a snake crawling through the conservatory at the very end. And so I remember thinking about that snake, a little bit. And Emily's dress in the end is that sort of green cut that's smocked to make that sort of texture of scales or a snake, right? And then I wanted it to go somehow with Sue, and she's wearing this brown floral, watery floral. And I sort of thought of them as being the snake in the garden, at the end, sort of finding Eden. I think, there's a lot of different, the snake imagery can go a lot of different places.
Okay, that's really cool. And also Sue, was it fun? Like obviously she gets like a more lavish taste. And she seems the best dressed in Amherst now. Was that fun to do?
Oh my God, it was so fun. Sue, first episode, I think she only had like a couple of dresses. She didn't have very much, it was poor orphan Sue, always in mourning, always in black. So that Sue's character is, everybody grows up a little bit in season 2, right? But Sue has the biggest departure. She goes from being Sue in season 1 to this sort of nouveau riche, spending all the money, having these lavish salons, never wanting to wear a dress twice, although she does. But there's that sentiment of excess for her. So that was really super fun. And also I got to push forward in the period a little bit. We sort of Amherst is sort of a rural area. It's not necessarily the most fashion forward, and the clothes from season 1 are especially grounded in that sort of country life a little bit. But with Sue and her salons, I got to push forward and have these elegant ball gowns, and we changed the silhouette a little bit. We added hoop skirts, the crinoline that adds the bell shape, which would be a very fashion forward thing to wear. So yeah, we definitely had a lot of fun. Ella and I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. Now, with these being real characters, like how much research did you have to do of what they would actually wear at the time, or did that not really?
Tons.
You did?
Tons. Okay. I always start with the period and primary research. I've been up several times to the Dickinson Museum, just walking around the property, looking at the house, having discussions with the staff there about her clothes. I went to, in a nearby town, Deerfield. They have a museum there that has historic real clothes from the period. And I went there and looked at their collection of clothes from this period to really sort of immerse myself in the period, and particularly in that place. You can look at all these fashion drawings from the period, which I did for Sue, but that's not really who these people are. So I really start with who they are. And then of course for our show, I sort of filter it all through this sort of contemporary lens to find the stuff that feels the most appealing to the modern eye, suit the comedy and that sort of thing.
Okay, yeah, because I was definitely curious because this is obviously set in the 1850s, but it has modern sensibilities. So I was just curious, where's that balance, right?
Yeah, it's really rooted in the period, very, very, very much so. But and even when I'm trying to find fabrics, I'm trying to find things that feel correct, feel real to that. But I definitely take some liberties. With the silhouette. We do hoop skirts for some people, but I tried to keep the silhouettes a little more contained. Some of the details of this period could get a little clunky, heavy feeling, and I definitely try to keep things a little airier and lighter and frothier, because it's a comedy. I'm trying to lean into the comedy whenever possible.
Okay. Now, when you say frothy in terms of clothing, what does that mean? Because I'm just thinking coffee.
There's a lightness to it. The fabrics are often very thin and soft, and it doesn't feel sort of weighted. In this period, especially as you go into the 60s and the Civil War, things can get very heavy trims, big buttons, things that feel sort of like weighted. And I just want things to have a sort of effortlessness to them, but also feel like real clothes. They should really feel like real clothes.
Okay, thank you. Now, with obviously the dresses are like very glamorous, but I'm interested to know what's it like with the suits, and because those are a bit more nuanced, what's it like making those stand out?
Well, we make all of those as well, all of the tailoring for the men, and it's great that you asked this, because people always want to talk about the dresses, but the menswear is just as difficult, perhaps even more so at times. Trying to get that feeling of the period. That when you look at the frock coats and stuff from the period, there's a very specific placement of seams and a sort of I don't know, I'm just trying to always capture the essence of it, which is not necessarily directly in correlation with the contemporary man's shape. Like men in the period were smaller, they didn't work out, they didn't have like big pecs and shoulders and that sort of stuff. And I'm always trying to find a way to feel like the period on a contemporary man's body. And then we have the same challenges with finding fabric for the menswear. The pants often have these big bold patterns, and how to combine that. It's always sort of this game of pattern matching and that sort of stuff. You want to make sure that your floral waistcoat goes well enough with your plaid pants and mix with your wool jacket, and I have a lot of fun combining all of those fabrics for the menswear.
Now, I was also wondering, like, for when what departments do you work closely with?
Oh, I work very closely with the art department. Neil Patel and I worked together previous to Dickinson on theater shows for the theater. And I think that in the theater, especially, there's a real sense of collaboration between the design departments, which doesn't always happen so much in TV. But what I love about having Neil is that since we come from theater, we enjoy doing that. So like just the other day, I asked him, like, we had this thing coming up in this location, and I showed him a series of swatches, fabric samples. And I'm like, listen, I really want Emily to sort of pop in this space, and you've been in there. Like, which one of these do you think is going to really feel right in there? And he gives me his opinion, and I really value that. I also work very closely with the set decorator, Marina Parker. She's amazing. And we'll talk about, I'm thinking about this for the couch, and I know she's going to spend a lot of time sitting there, and want to make sure that they play together nicely, and she doesn't end up matching the couch or something like that. So I collaborate a lot with both of those. And also props, taking pocket watches and glasses, that's generally falls under the purview of props, and just make sure that everything feels like it all works together.
Okay. Yeah, I always love props, and I noticed in one episode, Sue's necklace, which I thought like really popped and complimented her outfit.
The black one. Yeah, the jewelry is me. I do the jewelry.
Okay.
For the women, props does typically the eyewear, and they'll do the pocket watches for the men.
Okay.
But now, at least I won't let the jewelry go. It's too fun.
Yeah, that's true. I think I have time for one last one, and I'll end on a non-costume design one. But curious, in the second episode, that winning cake from Emily, did you guys get to eat it?
Okay, no, we didn't get to eat it. But I've heard that people have found the recipe online and made it. I'm really curious. But no, we didn't. At least I didn't.
No? Okay.
I don't think it was ever offered to me. I think if it was offered, I would have tried it, but I don't think it was ever offered.
Okay, so it didn't make it down to you, I guess.
I was probably running around doing something somewhere else. There's no time for cake eating. We're running around like crazy trying to put these period clothes on people.
Yeah, and then you might get the cake on the clothes, so not a good match.
Fussing with the bonnet, so there's no time for eating cake.
Fair enough. So Jennifer Moeller, costume designer for Dickinson, which is now on Apple TV Plus. Thank you so much for chatting with me on the Film Craziest Show.
Thank you so much for having me.